Well, hey there, folks. How's it going? Oh man, I got some real green. This is looking or better. Okay. Hey everyone, it's great to have you here tonight. It's great to be back. We are joined tonight by a friend and fellow researcher, Matt Heines, and I think you're going to enjoy tonight's show because I always say that two Hines are better than one.
Oh boy.
And happy holidays to everyone, first of all, and happy holidays to you, Matt. Matt is coming to us from the great state of Washington, and I'm in Colorado. First of all, can everyone hear me okay? Just let me know how the audio is on your side of YouTube. Okay, it looks like we're working. Guys, I've got a slightly newer and improved setup here, so we should not have any of the hiccups we've had in the past. It should be clean and green throughout the whole show. And welcome. So we've got Julie, Brian. Hi, Brian. Sunsaver. Oh, yes. We've got a good crowd here tonight of very knowledgeable people. I will tell you that, Matt. So, Matt, welcome to the show. How are you tonight?
Well, thank you, Simeon, or do I have to call you Dr. Hine?
You have to call me Dr. Hine for the whole show.
All
No,
right.
forget it. No, because PhD is post-hole digger. Do not forget that.
Oh,
And I was very
yes,
good
I
at
never.
digging post holes for one of my girlfriends in the past, and that's what I knew my degree had become. It was all for post hole digging, which I learned to do. But yeah, Simeon, fine.
All right. Well, I appreciate the formality, and I guess you've taken it to a new level because the last I heard, it was piled higher and deeper.
Yes, that happens.
So
Do
yes,
you
I
really
have
think
a
that could
MA.
happen in academia? Do you think it could?
What's that?
Do you think
Oh,
that?
yeah. Well, I don't think academia would exist, nor would politics, without piling it higher and deeper. So,
Well, yes, I'm afraid it's true, and that fits perfectly into what we're about to talk about tonight. Um, Matt, you had me on your show about a year and a half ago, didn't you?
yeah, but I don't think it was voluntarily.
It was voluntary.
I think I had to have somebody over to your house to, get you up, get
Well,
you on the computer.
so let me just tell the listeners here how I actually got to know Matt. Matt contacted me about 2 years ago. He said, "Hey, we've got the same last name. We both graduated from good old WSU in Pullman, Washington, where we both went to school, where I did my graduate work. Little did I know, I was only a few yards from Grover Krantz. But
Exact.
yeah, I was in the sociology building. Anthropology was the next floor up. I was probably in the elevator with him many times. And back then, I wasn't really interested in such foolish topics. I was focused on, academia, and I knew how the world worked. Matt, WSU tells you these things and you believe them. It was statistics and research methods, and I wasn't interested really in these topics at all.
Well, Simeon, a couple of things
Yeah,
here is,
good.
first of all, you neglected to point out that you did find there were actually brothers
Yes.
somewhere back along the anthropological chain. Not really, though. I don't want to scare your viewers off. But yes, Simeon and I graduated from WSU, Washington State University, which makes us above average. Why am I having a problem saying that? Above average cool.
Yes.
So beyond that, um, the on the Grover Krantz thing. Actually, I wanted to ask you: were you in Wilson Hall?
Yes.
Oh my gosh! So history was like what? I think we were on the first,
You guys were the
second.
first. Yeah. And then we
Yeah.
had There was home economics on the second floor.
Yeah.
I'm kidding, guys. There was a rural sociology department in the basement, and good old sociology was on third, and there was anthropology, and political science was another building. We had anthropologists, and you weren't allowed to take any classes from them, by the way. You couldn't get credit because it was outside the department.
Wow.
So Matt contacted me a couple years ago, and he said, hey, we have the same last name. We both graduated from WSU, and you seem to be interested in topics that I'm also interested in, right, Matt? And you had me on your show. And you started talking about some nonsense about something about Bigfoot and Dogman and these things that I have not been able to get out of my head ever since that interview. So thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. Well, you are very welcome. And I want to point out here, Simeon, that you've been on my show actually, I think
Yes.
you've been on 3 times.
Yes.
And you've been on with Carrie Cassidy of Project Camelot.
Carrie, yes.
And in all that time, I have not gotten an answer out of you yet that I'm looking for. So hopefully tonight you're going to open up just a little bit. But Simeon, you keep jumping back to this how do I want to say, pesky topic called, or pesky subject called science. And you keep talking about, well, the scientific method. Well, I know you've been doing some remote viewing, and I'm really interested in remote viewing. And so I think we can have a fair exchange here. I'll exchange you some Bigfoot Dogman stuff, but I want to know what's going on as far as remote viewing lately. So is that fair?
Well, we can talk about that towards the end.
I'm
as far as I'm concerned, this is sort of an open discussion. But the reason I contacted you is, since that interview about these topics of Bigfoot and cryptids and Dogman. And by the way, when I first heard you mention Dogman, I thought, oh, sure, here comes another fantasy invented by, people who are way out on the edge of the paranormal. I've dealt with people like this so much. I started reading books after that interview, Matt. I started taking a look at it because I consider myself to be an open-minded person. And I basically haven't been able to stop reading and listening and researching into these topics. And I have to tell you, my idea of reality has changed again since that interview. I just want people to know, about 2 years ago, these topics were not on my radar. I had encountered witnesses to this. They had taken the RV class, people from Colorado, people out west. These were interesting stories for me. People at UFO conferences would tell me about their experiences at summer camp, their relatives, and so forth. It didn't really sink in. It was always, that's an interesting story. This is an undiscovered ape. We know it's just an undiscovered ape. It's rare. And it's something that I can sort of not really focus on until our interview, until you mentioned these topics, and I started looking into it. And I just want people to know, it was ever since this interview with this gentleman you see sitting before you that I actually started reading, and I can't stop reading about it now. I didn't realize how widespread the contact was. It's no different than UFO contact, ET contact, and whatever other types of contact people have. They're seldom likely to talk about it with strangers, neighbors. They will talk about it with people like Matt and other interviewers. And what I'm wondering from you, Matt, is how did you get started in this topic at all?
Well, I guess that I would have to say that I grew up in a small town in Washington, and religious background. And in the religion I grew up in, things like UFOs and, well, let's take the Tower of Babel, for instance. There are people that believe that the Tower of Babel was maybe not a tower at all, but maybe that was some kind of a spaceship. and that they had advanced technologically enough to actually travel, out into space, whatever. And maybe that's what that was. And so it got me interested in the idea that, well, everything that you read, especially when you're talking about like the Bible and stuff that happens in history, a lot of times you can't take it literally. And then later on, when I read Von Daniken, then okay, well, that all makes sense. It's the language. They just didn't have the language to describe it. So when you grow up, your whole world is based on the Christian Judeo model, and you want to make sense of the world around that model, then when somebody comes along and things just don't fit in, and somebody comes along like Von Daniken, and says, these things actually, they just didn't have the language to describe it, but probably these were spaceships from other civilizations. And that being said, my religion, I don't want to go into what religion it is, but if you are of that religion, you would know what religion I'm talking about, but believes absolutely in other civilizations, UFOs, and no other Christian religion would do that. But this one always has. And in fact, I wrote a whole book based on the fact that this whole religion is based on UFO encounters, or not UFO encounters, but encounters with extraterrestrial beings, and not necessarily extraterrestrial biological beings. So you're right. We are opening up a new world or a new chapter in history, but I think our common ground, and I think what really opened things up for you, was that you studied crop circles. And there you're talking about some kind of where our Dogman comes from, and possibly the Bigfoot, and that is a portal. So, can I ask you about how a crop circle would relate to a portal, or do you think that they're similar at all?
No, it's a very good question. And before I answer that, I want to point out that Matt has an extensive YouTube channel that you should all check out. Just to introduce him properly, he's wearing his T-shirts, which you can.
I don't know if you can see it.
You can actually purchase these. Encounters USA. Now, Matt has done some fabulous interviews, and I watch them myself now, with all sorts of witnesses and researchers of these topics. As he mentioned, he's had me on a couple times. The last time I was on it was a fascinating discussion with Ron Moorhead of Sierra Sounds fame. It was really an honor to be on the same discussion with him, and a researcher, I forgot her name, from New Hampshire. And it was sort of a discussion of quantum Bigfoot versus flesh and blood Bigfoot. All of you watching, most likely, if you're watching live, you know there's a real debate amongst researchers, amongst the people that believed, a la Grover Krantz and others, people that started this research decades ago. Is this an undiscovered forest ape? Is it an undiscovered person? Or are there paranormal and quantum aspects to it which make it very challenging to understand? And it's so interesting that so many of these researchers, you interviewed Igor Bortsev not too long ago at Medellin Falls Bigfoot Conference. And I happen to have seen him nearby in Bailey. He's the guy, I'm putting up his photo here, Matt. He's the guy on the right. He's with Don, who wrote about the braided horses on the left. But he basically came to the conclusion that this was a sort of a paranormal entity because of all the witness accounts that he had dealt with in Russia. Igor being from Russia, and the phenomena of Bigfoot is the same, very similar in Russia as it is in the U.S. And I would imagine, Matt, that Igor's been studying this as long as anyone else we know, for 50 years. He started out as a political scientist and switched to this topic, and he presented so much evidence. You've seen it yourself. You interviewed him. So you end up with the conclusion of many of these researchers that there's something really different. Ron Moorhead, the same way. I'm going to put Ron's photo up here for a second. Ron Moorhead, the explorer researcher that encountered these creatures up in the Sierra Nevada mountains in a very remote area. And he came to the same conclusion, which is why he wrote a book called The Quantum Bigfoot, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So people who've been around investigating this topic a lot longer than me or even Matt came to the conclusion that because of all of these very strange phenomena that are associated with these creatures, one of which being that you can't see them a lot of the time, even though they seem to be very close to you, like within a few feet, and you still can't see them. They're breaking branches around you, knocking on trees, hooting and hooping, and making sounds like a bulldozer going through the forest, but you don't see anything. Ron said they had the camera set up. They had on a string, back in the 70s. He said in these books, his other book about Bigfoot, the prior book, that was a very extensive book, by the way, because all the times they went up there, and he says they had it on strings, the cameras you had back, and they still couldn't get any pictures. So to answer your question, Matt, since it's a good question, the phenomena we see around crop circles is very similar to the phenomena we see around Bigfoot encounters. I should say some of Bigfoot encounters. It's not that people don't encounter something that does seem like a physical, huge, hairy physical being nearby them. But it seems like we can't get away from the paranormal aspects, for lack of a better word. And I'm talking there the orbs, balls of light, right? The strange effects on cameras, batteries, strange sounds, strange experiences of time, and many other types of phenomena, invisibility. I don't think we can deny that that's real. Igor told us a story at the conference in Bailey, Colorado, earlier this year. I'm sure you're aware of this case. So this woman's in her garden in Russia, and she sees this huge, tall, Bigfoot-like creature. It comes towards her, and then, I don't know if Igor ever told you this story. He showed us a slide that the woman had drawn. The power lines were behind it, so they're able to estimate the height at about 8 feet. Mm-hmm. That it just looked like a curtain of light was coming down, and it vanished right in front of her, just a few feet away from her. And so, is it a portal phenomena? Go back to your question. Is it a portal phenomena? That's the question. And what sort of phenomena are we actually dealing with here? Matt, here's what I can say to keep the answer short. It's something way off the charts of what science has ever dealt with before. Let me put it that way. Way off the charts.
Well, because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to, make a connection between, what we're talking about, the Dogman, and that's the first one, because and I will quote Ken Gerhardt. I talked to him out in Medellin Falls, the cryptozoologist, and he made a very good point, and that is that, you've got large humanoid Bigfoot or humanoid creatures that could possibly pass for Bigfoot in the fossil record, have been found. But there is nothing in the fossil record for a Dogman. So the question is, and why I'm trying to pin you down on these crop circles, is that the Dogmen are coming in from somewhere. We can't find Bigfoot, so he must be coming in and out of somewhere. And we've talked about this. I've talked about this almost ad nauseum. Is that we're constantly left hints by Spielberg and Lucas about Bigfoot and aliens. So that they seem to know things that we hear from anecdotes and stories. So I would just like to, and what I'm really trying to do is get you over to the topic of crop circles, because I'd like to ask you just one question that's just, probably a real bizarre question about crop circles. But can I do that?
I know it's hard to pin me down, but keep trying, Matt. Just keep trying, and you'll get there. But go ahead, ask your question. I mean, it's
Okay.
related, and I'll do my best to see if we can connect them.
Okay. So crop circles. And if you want to talk about how they're related, I mean, you've seen that show Skinwalker Ranch, right? Which is the famous portal.
Yep.
I mean, that's where we get. I mean, they show the electromagnetic phenomena. They show a cow dropping basically dead, UFO in the sky. They show some real, I mean, some real scientific, measurable stuff that's going on there. Not the real fantastic stuff that happened before, but I mean, legitimate people said they saw like a portal open and a huge dog thing come out. Dog came and attacked the guy's
Cow
cows,
had the mouth around the head. Yep. Yep.
yeah. And so, but these things are coming and going from where? So here's my question. On the crop circles, we think in the anthropomorphic sense that, well, the crop circles are for us. What if the crop circles are not for us? What if the crop circles are just a way, they're signs for each other, for the aliens? You know, has anybody ever looked into that?
Um, these
I mean,
top.
why would they even need to leave them for us? I mean, they don't care if we can fly or not. And for a long time, we couldn't fly, and so we wouldn't even have known they were there. But they were still leaving them, we assume, because they're in the those etchings from.
Yeah, it's these topics are all a subset of a newer science that we're becoming aware of. It's an old science, is called coherent matter. Every single one of the things that you're mentioning is a subset of coherent matter sciences. It's another state of matter. And when it's not there, you have an ordinary state of matter where we're emitting heat, you have to generate energy to do something. Exothermic conditions, entropy. There's another state of matter called coherent matter where those conditions don't apply, and you're kind of tapping into a kind of a background energy of the universe that can create an over unity situation.
Okay.
And
is this 0 point?
No,
0
not
point
necessarily
energy?
0 point.
Okay.
No, not necessarily 0 point. It doesn't have to be 0 point. It could be, but there's other ways to get there. Relic neutrinos, something we can talk about at another time. So their topics are related, and I think that's why you get some of these similar sorts of phenomena happening. That you're talking about Skinwalker Ranch. I did see the first season of the show, and I've read about it and so forth. So, it seems to me almost everything that's showing up in that show is related to coherent matter, because one of the side effects of creating clusters of particles, charge clusters, exotic vacuum objects, and so forth, is you can get excessive radiation even into the X-ray or gamma range, ionizing radiation that can cause injury. And it's certainly one of the things to look for in all these phenomena is, do we find this sort of anomalous X-ray energy showing up? Because, even like, okay, you're familiar. Are you familiar with the recent book Skinwalkers at the Pentagon
No.
by James Lukatsky and Colm Keller and George Knapp? You've heard, George Knapp from,
No. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
George Knapp, yeah. So we're gonna have to continue the conversation if you want to get familiar with it, because that is actually written by the OSAP director, the director of the Advanced Aerospace Weapons Systems Application Program. Sorry for the long acronym, but he's the guy that ran the program, and he comes out. I made a couple YouTube videos on this book because it was so astounding. We had heard from some of the spokespeople at the Pentagon, Susan Go and others, that the OSAP program was for foreign technology. And this will connect to your question in a second, Matt. And then I can ask you some more questions. We have a question here.
Okay, all right, hold on.
No.
Go. Is she the one that? Okay,
yeah, good. No, good. She's one of the spokespeople at the Pentagon who's been kind of downplaying. Everyone listening knows who this is. She's been saying, she comes out of a background of psychological operations, psyops, to downplay what's going on with, UAP, UFO disclosure, ATIP, what's going on in the Senate right now, and efforts to get the Pentagon to be more open about this topic, based on the experiences of the naval pilots from the USS Nimitz, Roosevelt, and now we're finding out the USS Omaha, with the swarm of objects that was around it in 2019, again off the coast of California. Lukatsky comes out, says this is not a foreign technology research program. We're not looking at our foreign adversaries, airborne platforms, and so forth. This is a UFO program. And it's a UFO program that had a lot to do with Skinwalker Ranch. That was our main focus, was the anomalies, just everything you just mentioned, Matt. So this is how it all connects. And if any of you thought this is a fringe topic, I mean, there is no way you get the Pentagon focusing millions of dollars on a research project like this at Skinwalker, which you're mentioning. Because this, Matt, this is exactly what they want to know. Is this a portal of some sort? Not just Skinwalker Ranch, the entire Uinta Basin and areas like it. There are other areas, like you've heard of Marley Woods in Missouri, I'm sure. Yeah, same sorts of things happened out at Marley Woods. Look, you can look it up. It was who was Heine's assistant, who did a lot of the ground research, trace cases. Just the tip of my tongue. So this is another sort of portal area. I would guess I'm calling it a portal. I don't know for sure that's exactly what it is. But to answer your question, man, I'm a multiverse guy. I believe there are parallel realities. It takes energy to hold our version of reality together, but coherent energy matter systems generate so much energy. It's not a problem for the beings in those parallel realities to get over here. And there's different symptoms of those parallel reality bleed through events happening. And the fact that we can even link Pentagon programs to this discussion, which, shows us that these are all interrelated, and we've all been kind of living in a bubble of reality, even myself included, because again, Matt, you were the one that kind of brought these topics, and I felt like I didn't know enough about them, so I should do more research. So going back to your discussion about Dogman, I mean, you know a lot more about these particular cryptid entities than me. You're saying that we haven't ever found any evidence, physical evidence of Dogman like we do. We find hair allegedly from Bigfoot. We find the footprints. We have tree structures, which I presented a little bit on this channel here and there, but all of you watching, you know what I'm talking about, or you can find. Do we find anything like that related to Dogman or even any of the other cryptids? And I should say, I was recently in Montana, and I was asking someone I met about Bigfoot, because as all of you know, Montana is like a major Bigfoot state. And there's plenty of books written about people's encounters in Montana. It's a big, vast state. And there's plenty of opportunities to encounter Bigfoot there. This person mentioned some Native Americans who lived on the Crow Reservation, which I've gone through hundreds of times on my way up there through Wyoming. And they mentioned seeing what they believe to be pterodactyls. Have you heard anything like this, in addition to these other cryptids?
Yeah, the Ken Gerhardt, I've seen his stuff where he's talking about them. They do something, I think it's on the History Channel, but yeah, there would be the pterodactyls, or what the natives called their thunderbird.
Thunderbirds, yeah, Thunderbirds.
But we on Encounters USA, we do aliens, Bigfoot, and Dogman, and so I would just think that those things, if they don't exist somewhere where, you know, we just don't see them very often, they're coming in and out of a portal. And, you know, if you don't mind, I'd really like to, you say so many interesting things, and I go, wait, let's stop and let's talk about that. So, if we could just go back very quickly to Skinwalker Ranch.
Rewind. Okay.
Yeah. You said that from what you believe, you think, that what you're talking about is a focal point of energy, and you're talking about neutrinos and stuff like that. But basically,
yes.
For a layman like me, a history guy, so you're just talking about a collection of energy that for some reason coalesces in one spot, and that would result in something being well. First of all, let's go to the crop circle. Would that concentration of energy create a crop circle?
I believe so.
But then that concentration. See, you can't interview me this late. I am just. It's like, it must be.
And so I am interviewing you, Matt. Let's just clear this up. I'm interviewing you, and you're a good interviewer. Matt's a natural interviewer, folks. So if you're wondering whose interview this is, it's very hard to challenging to interview Matt, because he's been doing this. Matt, quick question before we go on to the crop circles and portals and relic neutrinos. How long have you been doing Encounters USA? I'm just curious. How far does it go back?
I'm going on 3 years.
3 years. Now, to go back to my original question, before we go back to crop circles, how long have you been interested in these topics? I mean, when did you...
since I was 8.
Okay, I just wanted to get this straight. So this is a long interest with you. So you've been studying this a long time, a lot longer than me. I took a diversion into graduate school and academia, and some of the papers I've written are not even related to these topics. I'm more known for other topics outside of this, believe me, that somehow got picked up and recited over and over again, just ordinary social science stuff. But go ahead.
Okay. So where were we? We were, okay, intelligence. Okay, so if the crop circle is energy, the crop circle is a design. So there must be intelligence within the energy. What's the story?
Look, honestly, this is a very complex subject. It's not just crop circles. So let's get this straight. Just like you can't overgeneralize about Bigfoot, one of the things I've realized just from listening to your channel and reading is there's so many types of big feet out there. It's not the correct expression. There are multiple species of this creature. It could be us from a long time ago. They could be our ancestors. We don't know who they're. So it's hard to generalize about. You know this, Matt. There's so many types of Bigfoot encounters, all the way from the very helpful type, even where people have the little baby Bigfoots in their homes and they're taking care of them for the parents. From that range all the way to the other range, which goes much more towards confrontation, as you even said in your interview with Igor. It's almost hard to talk about. It's almost impossible to bring up, because the relationship between us and the Bigfoot species is so complicated and so far back. Crop circles are not that complicated, but they're multiple sources. So there are different sources of crop circles, but there are some that are made by ball lightning, thunderstorms. I don't know how the intentionality fits in there, but we have witnesses now. One of which I was really astounded, a cold fusion researcher in Japan, Takeaki Matsumoto, whose papers are coming forward right now thanks to the translation efforts of Bob Greenyer from the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project, Martin Fleischmann being the cold fusion researcher at the University of Utah, with Stanley Pons, who were let go from their cold fusion results in '89. This all connects. He says that he witnessed these crop circles near areas of thunderstorms for 3 days in a row. Small circles, radial patterns. We know that those type exist. I've seen them myself in the UK about 10 years ago. Ones that I looked at and I said, that is a spontaneous swirl. You saw a couple more going down the field. No footprints, no signs of, boards. So that's one source, but people imitated that and made them more complicated. But as I've said over and over again, and I don't know if this message has ever quite sunk in, but as long as I'm around, I'm going to keep repeating it. I'm going to keep repeating the propaganda till it sinks in. Kidding. That even those shapes, if you repeat them, you're going to start creating the same physics effects again as the ones that are created by ball lightning and UFOs. Not far from you, well, the other side of the state, Usk, Washington, is where Louise Voves, one of the witnesses from my Black Swan Ghost book, was picking huckleberries with her brother, and they saw a disc with the classic wobbly leaf pattern, falling leaf is kind of wobbling, and it left the area, it went right over the meadow and flattened it. She said flat as a pancake. What does that sound like to you? Flattened grasses and so forth. Not a crop circle, but it's an eyewitness that I interviewed. She's no longer here. By the way, one of her nieces wrote me and thanked me for posting the video on YouTube so she can show her kids who grandma was. It was a younger relative, who said, "Oh wow, there she is on YouTube. If you hadn't done that, we wouldn't have had any videos of her." It's her video talking about the UFO sighting over Usk, Washington, picking huckleberries. Yeah, picking huckleberries. Well, we know about berry picking, folks, because this is highly correlated also with Bigfoot sightings and encounters. And in fact, we have someone on the channel you don't know, Jules, but I interviewed her once about her Bigfoot sighting as a kid in Indiana. It was, I believe, at the end of the street. You can correct me, Jules, if I'm getting this wrong, but she saw a whitish Bigfoot picking berries as a kid, and I just looked at her, and then, of course, no one believed her. Her mom said, "Oh, it was probably a neighbor in a big jacket." Yeah, in summer. So there's multiple sources for the crop circles, UFOs, ball lightning, and people. So it's a little hard to answer your question, Matt, directly because there's different types. But I think once the shape is there, it acts as a type of a lens. And it lenses certain types of particles together so that you're still getting into the realm of coherent matter. Once you have coherent matter, all sorts of things are possible that seem like science fiction. But this is not science fiction. Lockheed Martin applied for a patent to the U.S. Patent Office to create coherent matter wave beams for use in cloaking, weaponry, and a host of other military type purposes. And the patent was awarded this year, March of 2021, for coherent matter wave beams. And everything in that article goes back to Nikola Tesla and creating coherent matter and coherent energy. Basically, when we're talking about coherent matter, folks, we're just talking about particles at the same frequency and temperature, unlike in the room where you are right now. So Jules says, yeah, it was the Sasquatch she saw as a kid was picking berries. Everything that you see right now is particles doing their own individual frequency at their own temperature, at their own
Frequency.
Yeah, frequency. And doing their thing as part of compounds to make things that we see. Well, what happens if they all spontaneously give up that individuality and join together? They become one big particle, which is known as ball lightning. And once you get that sort of phenomena happening, they can create a lot of energy and move in ways that don't seem like what we're used to. They create their own gravitational field. They sort of neutralize gravity. And then when they dishevel, when they come apart and they go back to being individualized, they suck all the heat out of the room or wherever they are. Now, how many times have you heard of UFO sightings, Sasquatch sightings, and others where it was very cold? Yeah. So I'm just suggesting some possibilities here because so here's my bent. Rather than multiply all these phenomena into many different phenomena, I like to look for the commonalities, and I see a lot of patterns in all of these phenomena. I remember talking to witnesses who said, as they were looking at this UFO over a building, this was in Florida in the summer, hovering over an apartment building, really large object, it just felt freezing all of a sudden. That is a symptom of coherent matter technology. It's in the Lockheed Martin patent. Okay? So I would say that we're dealing with similar phenomena. Now, going back to Dogman, this is a type of cryptid. Let me just say, for those of you, who are not familiar, when Matt mentioned Dogman to me, I hadn't heard of Dogman. I thought something I don't believe in. Well, it turns out policemen have been seeing Dogman all over the United States. I even heard of a case in Michigan recently where there were teeth marks and claw marks 8 feet up on a cabin somewhere that looked like they were made by a canine. The reason we don't hear about this is because these people do not want to be seen as fools in the eyes of the public. They don't talk about it. And that's the worst thing. Matt, would you agree that for some of these witnesses, people who've experienced this, I'm not talking about the Igor Burtsevs or the Don Monroes or the Ron Moorheads, they don't know where to go to share a story of an encounter with a Dogman or a Bigfoot, and they kind of keep it to themselves, don't they, until they meet you or me or some other researcher that's willing to lend them an open ear?
Well, I'll just say that I've never seen Bigfoot. I've seen UFOs down at Skinwalker Ranch, but if I saw Bigfoot, I probably wouldn't tell anybody. And I have an Encounters USA show, but because people would say, well, yeah, because you have an Encounters USA show, so of course you saw Bigfoot. But yeah, I think that's pretty much a common thing. But with our going back to this Dogman thing,
yeah.
We cannot let this go without saying this.
Go ahead.
Egypt, Anubis,
yes,
Dogman. Yes. Okay, most prominent Dogman probably in history. How do you explain that? And like you, Simeon, I didn't know anything about it. I started listening to not Wes Germer.
Germer.
No, it's not Wes. It's the guy who does Dogman Chronicles. Anyway, it's an awesome show.
Oh, it's a Dogman Chronicles.
And I was like, what is this thing? And where would this thing even come from? But the stories that I heard on there, and then I interviewed the head of the Dogman Project for North America, and he's telling me that, St. Christopher was a Dogman. And so, okay, at some point, you hear a lot of stories and whatever, but I like to remain scientifically grounded. And is there proof for this stuff? There is Anubis. They worshipped a Dogman. And so, but the native, and what I really, I hear white people talking about the Dogman. I don't, I give it some credence, but when I hear Native Americans like Clifford Mahooty talking about the Dogman, and not the Skinwalker type, but the actual Dogman, this big, huge thing that roams around the Southwest and I guess Michigan, whatever, then that's pretty freaky because where did it come from? What's it doing here? And it doesn't seem to, I mean, no, as far as we know, it doesn't hurt people. It just kind of messes with them. So what's the story?
Okay. So so this is the question you asked me about 20 minutes ago, which I haven't completely answered yet. It's where does the creature like this come from? If you had asked me about this a couple years ago, I wouldn't have been able to give you a really good answer because I hadn't read enough of people's encounters. Like I knew UFO encounters really well. I knew crop circle stories from being around there so many years. I haven't been over there recently just because of, virus situation and everything. So I'm used to these stories of people, and they were around UFOs and extraterrestrial encounters. And the topics are not really separated. Just like researchers have shown that there's like a correlation between Bigfoot sightings and UFO sightings and other types of encounters. So, Matt, to answer your question, I think what we have to say here is that we're surrounded by different life forms that are not always in a tangible frequency. I think scientifically we have to accept this at this point. We've got this book, Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, written by a missile scientist working for a Defense Intelligence Agency. And he gives story after story in there of them encountering all sorts of things that he claims followed them home. They now have there's a new term, Matt. It's called the hitchhiker effect. It's almost as if the people you interviewed, I've listened to some of your interviews recently, people who lived in Texas, Idaho, Cindy, and others. She felt like she was leaving Texas, that this was going to end, right? She goes to North Idaho. You had her on, Cindy Ann, you had her on the show about half a year ago. Yeah. And lo and behold, she's in a new location in North Idaho, and it all starts up again, right? So in the Skinwalkers at the Pentagon book, he calls this the hitchhiker effect because the researchers who went out to Skinwalker Ranch, and these are folks from Defense Intelligence Agency, Matt, people from the Pentagon, scientists, people with security clearances. Lo and behold, what do they find once they get home to suburban Maryland or Virginia or what other Beltway community they live in near Washington, D.C.? Dogmen.
Really?
Dogman. They said, they don't use the word dogman. He said it looked like a huge wolf standing on two legs, menacing, staring at you from the edge of your property in the woods. Lots of woods in Virginia and right around Washington, D.C. Not only that, the kids start seeing this dogman, even when the parents aren't around, and their friends start seeing it in their backyards. So Lukatsky's arguing here that these entities sort of, and I'm not agreeing with this, I'm just presenting what the book says, and all of you listening can have your own view of this. I made a video about it, what I thought was going on. He says they sort of attach themselves to you. It's like a type of contagion of a disease. He uses a disease model. I don't think that's what it is at all. I don't think anything is attaching itself to you. I think that these entities can move in ways that we don't comprehend. Our little brains don't get. We're thinking physically with normal matter. We've heard this happen with Bigfoot many times, that the person has an encounter out 100 miles from their home. They go home on the highway. They're driving at highway speeds, and it shows up that night outside the window. So this is not like a disease contagion. This is some sort of frequency shift that the person has been exposed to. So to answer your question, Matt, and you can chime in, of course, you can say, I think that we have to accept there are life forms around us that are not always physically manifested, that may be able to move. And Julie's pointing out here that the neighbors weren't told about it. They didn't. It's not like the kids said, hey, we saw this, and it just sort of spread throughout the neighborhood without people physically talking about it. There's other forms of life out there that don't have the same constraints that we do based on how we generate energy as humans, as sort of ordinary biological organisms. And I think the main reason, Matt, that we're not talking about this as a country, as a society, we don't have a public discussion. I've heard there are town hall meetings about this subject occasionally because people start seeing these in the neighborhood. It's hard for our egos to accept that there's something out there that is in many ways superior to us physically or mentally, or it has athletic abilities that we can't quite comprehend. That's my view of it.
Well, can I just chime in here?
No, please go ahead.
On this Skinwalker Ranch defense stuff, so these guys went in there, and these are defense people. They're looking for weapons.
Yeah.
They want to unleash this crap on somebody, right? They want to threaten somebody with it. They want to capture it. They want to control it. They want to understand it, put it in a box, and then unleash it on Iran and whatever. And, so I think that mentality might have got them in a little trouble because they opened up Pandora's box. And, because the story of, these guys, and these are security guys, military guys, they don't have any motivation to make the story up. We're talking about a couple of like dog men wearing trench coats and hats, smoking cigarettes, standing in front of their headlights at night, and then the dog man coming out of what they said was a portal. The portal opened up, dog man came out, this huge dog came out, and it ran off. So I've heard like Rich Germeau was a sheriff. He had encounters with Bigfoot. He said they followed him home, and I'm skeptical. I'm skeptical about stories about guys that are looking for Bigfoot in Washington and drive home to Oregon, and then they hear a reply to their wood knocks when they get out of the car. But Bob Bigelow, in that Skinwalker Ranch series, I think it was that or it was in Knapp's thing, but he said it's about consciousness. So that consciousness, like Dracula, you can't let, Dracula can't get in your house unless you invite him in. Well, Dogman, they invited this thing in. They had an intention to use it in a hostile manner, and it bit him. It bit him in the ass, and now it's come to haunt him. And now they're going to have to live with it. But I really, and I don't know, and I'd like to hear what your viewers or listeners think. But I think that they messed with something they shouldn't have messed with, and it's way more powerful than them. And it's going to cause them, and it could cause them really bad problems later on for them and their families, because now it's there.
Yeah.
So.
No, Matt, that's a good point. I appreciate your point of view on that. I think what this is all teaching us is we need to have respect for all types of life. We learned it with this the virus situation that we've had, COVID recently, so forth, that things are more complex than you can understand. Things can change. They can mutate. I think about it, earlier in this year we thought we had this kind of COVID beat, and it mutates into multiple variants, changes. This is not in a different topic. We sort of think we know what's going on, okay? I'm saying we, formal society, where I come from in academia. I've been to so many conferences, folks, you can't imagine, for years, even before these topics, going to conferences, talking, listening, asking questions. Experts believe they know what's going on. How about if we don't know what's going on? Really? That there are life forms on the planet right now that we have no idea of, and they just touched the surface with the Skinwalker research, okay? Just touching the surface. And everyone who's encountered this in modern society, because we're all concerned with our image and what people think about us, employers, neighbors, and so forth, we seldom mention things that we feel are going to make us, be ridiculed. And, I think for mammals, the worst thing is to feel like you're going to be made fun of and expelled from the tribe. I think it's a deep fear that mammals have. And I think that fear has, led us not to talk about this. So, I mean, I want to thank you for having your show as one of, several researchers out there that have kind of brought this forward. Isn't it kind of ironic that because we have the internet and this technology, that these sort of old topics can come out again and seem new? It's almost like, where did they go? I don't believe any of this is new. Like you're saying, Dogman could have been around the whole time. It wasn't even on my radar before your show, Matt. And now I read stories about it, and unfortunately, they're not. There are encounters where there's injuries and casualties, especially to pets.
Yeah. Well, now I shouldn't say, because the most classic one happened in the land between the lakes in Michigan. A family was just torn to pieces by a dogman, and I just want to add that. Talking to Jody Cook of the Dogman Society, they call the dogman, if there is a ranger or whatever, a search and rescue incident, and they start using the term black dog, that's a dogman. Brown cow is Bigfoot.
Yeah.
So if you hear the term black dog, then that means that there's a thing in the area. And I said, well, Led Zeppelin has a song called Black Dog. So what's the correlation there?
Oh,
Aleister Crowley. Who knows?
Okay, Matt, I have to ask you this. I should say, folks, that Matt has another identity has a political career too. And I don't know very much about you, Matt, but I've seen enough videos of you running for office in Washington State, and we want to give you support. I'm not sure if you and I, if we engaged in a political discussion, we'd agree on that many things, but I want to encourage, it's good that you're doing this. This is a country where you can express your point of view. You can run for office, and Matt is someone who's done this. Matt, who knows about this, what we're talking about, and hasn't told us from, local government, National Park Service? You were the one that suggested to me that there was an ulterior motive for the Park Service. Can you elaborate on that for a moment?
Yeah, I'm going to make it even simpler than that, because you were just talking about your, what was it, your unified wave technology. This is about, I don't know about Bigfoot, whatever, but I know as far as the UFOs go, and, let's say that I'm in Congress. If we have technology that will allow us to fly to another planet or another solar system in a couple of minutes or whatever, do I really want to share that with some people that are bent on taking over the world and enslaving people, and who genocide people as a matter of, they don't even care about stuff like that? So for me, I am kind of for the secrecy. And I know that people probably don't want to hear that.
Boo! No, go ahead.
Yeah.
No.
But if come on, it's out there. The information's out there. They're giving it to you. They're providing it to you. They're just saying, well, hey, we're not going to force it down people's throat. We're not going to put it on the 5 o'clock news, because those idiots couldn't, and no offense to people who watch the 5 o'clock news, but those people can't handle this. Those people do their jobs. They go to sleep. They want to feel secure about the world. If you're interested in it, we put out the information to you, but we're not going to make anything official. And a lot of what you're seeing also is, you are talking about a whole myriad of government agencies. They don't work well together. Some of them have information they don't want to share, et cetera, et cetera. But the bottom line, as far as the technology goes, is that is people's money, and it's also our security. I mean, if you could fly across the world in a couple seconds, how are you going to keep track of immigration, stuff like that? So,
it raises lots of issues, yeah.
So as far as, but politically, I just want to say this, that I'm running because we have a government based on, and it started with the UFOs in the Cold War. Our government, as a matter of course, lies to us and says, screw you. This is our government. We pay our tax money to it. We trust them with our lives. And they say, we're going to lie to you as a matter of course. And it's just become it's become ingrained in our culture and our psyche. And now we've got this virus that nobody knows how to handle it. Nobody knows when it's going to end. Nobody knows anything about it except that we're going to scare the crap out of a lot of people because that's how we can maintain power. No, I don't agree with that. And I think about 2/3 of the world doesn't agree with that. And so I'm running for Congress to change it.
More power to you. Well, this is a whole nother topic. And before we get our video banned here, we'll just keep it at
They
that.
won't ban me. For some reason,
They don't ban you. No, they like us, Matt. They like us. I've never been banned either. But we're running up past an hour. I told you we'd just go about an hour, and
I work for by the hour.
I've paid you by the hour. No, folks. Does anyone have any questions for either myself or Matt? We've had a lot of good comments here. I don't know if you have this open on your end, but we have really good questions and comments. It's quite an educated group of people tonight. I really appreciate all of you watching. These are people that know about these topics really well. They're very well versed, and they are asking and saying very interesting things throughout the whole hour here. James mentioned Fukushima meltdown. I have to tell you that there is an effort right now to use coherent matter, something called the Ohmasa gas, which is a type of low energy nuclear reaction type of plasma gas, HHO gas. Mm-hmm. I've talked to people around here in Boulder that actually worked with it. It creates these coherent matter charge clusters. One of the properties of coherent matter is that it transmutes material for real. Alchemy, it's real. Radioactive materials around exotic vacuum objects become neutralized, and there is a movement to use this type of coherent matter technology to remediate Fukushima. And Bob Grenier and his crew are writing proposals right now. The Japanese government is taking suggestions what to do with Fukushima waste, the millions of gallons of tritium waste. Rather, their plan is to pour it into the ocean slowly, which would eventually go through the fish and end up in our food chain and really cause cancer down the road, which to me is just unacceptable. To people haven't even been born yet will get cancer from that tritium waste. You could remediate it, and with this sort of exotic vacuum object technology, using when you and I've been reading the research from Matsumoto and others who've found this out, is when you expose radioactive materials to these charge clusters, it basically, in a very relatively short amount of time, turns them into other elements that are completely neutral. You know, things like just regular metals and things. So just to
ask you a question.
Go ahead.
On your coherent matter, is it creating a field?
Yeah, it does.
And then it converts. Okay. And how do you create the field? Are you setting up two posts somewhere and then they something like that?
Tesla was the one that started doing this 100 years ago.
Okay.
He created ball lightning in a lab, and someone from Canada recently recreated the Tesla technology, David Boutelier, to the letter based on Tesla's writings from Colorado Springs. Guess what he produced? I've seen the video. It's on the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project channel. Ball lightning, little ball light. You can see it moving around. So anytime so to answer your question, you can create it from cavitation. A guy named Mark Leclerc, who presented in Boulder, used cavitation to create these charge clusters. Anytime you get vibration, you get collisions, you get them in motors, but they're not self-sustaining. You get it anytime you have water running over a stream bed. You're creating small amounts of them, which is partly why it feels charged. It feels good to be around that. Obviously, thunderstorms, but there's various methods, and one of them is to use HHO gas, where you've separated the hydrogen and the oxygen.
Yep.
And you can create charge clusters you can just expose things to the HHO gas and it will create charge clusters. So there's a couple ways to do it, but it's actually not that hard. And one of the researchers that studied this, Ken Shoulders, who was looking at a researcher that worked at SRI and was looking at the work of John Hutchinson. I'm sure you've heard of his ability to create these fractured metal samples with Tesla technology. Believed, you mentioned the ancient Egyptians. If you look at his book, EV, A Tale of Discovery, where he goes into the whole technology, he said the Egyptians must have been doing this because all you need is charge separation, which you can get from amber and any other insulating materials, and cat's hair to create the charges. And then when the charges come back together, you get a cluster. And if you can find a way, you could develop that into a technology which could create all sorts of exotic effects that we're, actually not that familiar with as a modern society, believe it or not. So let's look at some of the questions. Go ahead. I'm going to look at the questions. Go ahead.
I just want to know if we'd answered his question.
So there's anytime you get charge separation, you're going to get Ken Shoulders, just really briefly on this, folks. He said every time you get a static shock from walking across a rug in a room and you touch a doorknob, that was a little bit of charge separation between the doorknob and you. And when you get that shock, that's some exotic vacuum objects in there. The thing is how to sustain it, how to turn it into some self-sustaining reaction that can actually be, technologically useful in some way. But there's a big paradox in this.
Simeon, can I interrupt you for a second?
Yeah.
Because in your, going back to the crop circles, you're talking about HHO. You're talking about hydrogen, right?
Yeah.
And oxygen, correct? Yes. Now, I saw a thing at one point in time in crop circles where they decoded what was in the crop circle, and it had told them how to microwave water to separate the hydrogen from the oxygen, right? Exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with this.
Brown's gas,
I saw a thing. Mm-hmm. Are you?
Yeah, sure.
So is that what you're talking about? That you're gonna separate the hydrogen out of the water?
That's right. That's one.
And that's going to create your field?
If you do it through cavitation, you can create these self-sustaining charge clusters. Now, what I wanted to say about it is, what's important is that there is a paradox here. This sort of process is not technologically friendly. It causes electronics to short out. If you were to create too many of these, and now think about it, what do we see around haunted sites, Bigfoot, crop circles, and UFO encounters?
Your batteries direct.
Exactly.
Every time.
That is the number one symptom of exotic vacuum objects, charge clusters, because they don't behave. Researchers have called it, Russian researchers, a second type of electricity. It's a cold electricity. It's another type of flow that works on it's like superconductivity. It shorts out all of your stuff. Now, I've been there when the batteries and cameras have shorted out in crop circles over and over. I've seen it happen, Matt. Mm-hmm. I've seen it happen in man-made circles I later found out was man-made. That's why I'm answering your question this way. So it's actually it's the pattern itself that creates the properties that it has. And once you do this, I just want to point this out. It's an important. The reason we don't have a free energy device working yet based on this technology, you've asked me some specific questions about it, Matt. It destroys the device through transmutation. So this is going to be challenging to figure out. There are ways you need to, it's not completely innocuous. Just like all Bigfoot encounters are not innocuous, as you know, Neither are Dogman encounters. That doesn't mean, folks, you should be afraid to go out where you're going. It means you should be aware. Like, don't walk on the trails with earpieces in there. Okay, that's like not a smart thing to do when you're in areas where these encounters can take place. We don't even know. Matt, and I'll let you ask your question in a second. Going back to the very first thing you asked me about portals, we don't know exactly what's going on out there. It's not like the Bigfoot are just out there in the woods walking around like an undiscovered ape. They're able to manifest some sort of network, could be in the mycelial network of fungus. Star Trek had a whole, thing in this most recent seasons about this sort of spore drive. Trees, it's like fractal patterns. There could be life forms that exist in the energy of fractal patterns, and which is why they sort of go together. But it just means you should be cautious out there. So go ahead, Matt. And I'm going to look for any more questions here before we wrap it up.
Yeah, I'd like to take any questions people have.
I realize I've said a lot about it, but in summary, it does seem to me, I could be wrong about this. I'm just going to take the position that the reason you have battery and camera failure around Bigfoot, around cryptids, around haunted sites, around UFO encounters, and around crop circles, I don't think those are 4 separate phenomena. They might be. I could be completely wrong. I think we're dealing with the same sort of process going on. And I think it's one that modern humans don't understand very well. We're so used to this ordinary silicon-based technology. We're not used to superconducting types of systems which have their own properties. And if some of these researchers are right, Matt, the Egyptians and other ancient civilizations were using this, which is why they were able to levitate and move around big, heavy. This is why all over the earth we see these huge monuments with these massive stones that weigh, up to 100 tons or something. How did they move those? We don't even have the machines that could do that very well nowadays. So
and if you're gonna, I think we always end up in the same place, and I think we ended up in the same place with Ron Moorhead, and that is, it really centers on electromagnetism. And if you're going to go down that electromagnetism road, then you end up with Ed Leeds Skeleton down at Coral Castle. And I'm just going to throw something at you as far as the battery draining, because I got introduced to that are you familiar with Skinwalker Ranch, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I got introduced to that. Michael Hall, the UFO I team, and they're telling me about, their batteries got drained at this place, and okay, sure, big deal. And I thought, maybe because they're forced to use too much energy at once because they're trying to capture something. But there's another explanation, and we're doing the Occam's razor thing. So why would a battery go dead, or why would it be used up, except that it went through time? Right? I mean, just an idea, but there's no other way. Why would a battery be drained? What would take the charge out of a battery? But if it went through time, then that's what batteries do. They become drained. So possibly, I'm not saying that it's happening, but is there an element of time that something that you're trying to capture is actually moving through time, and in capturing it, it's also taking it through time as well? Crazy idea. But I'll give you one for instance. And after these UFOI team guys told me about their batteries being drained, we went up to this lake outside of Mount Adams, and they had all their stuff set up. And Lee, one of his iPhones started dialing. It started dialing people, right? Mm-hmm. And then his battery one of his other batteries went dead. He's going, oh my God, my batteries are dead. And then a UFO appears over Mount Adam, and it looked like a chandelier. And it just appeared and just slowly sank behind the mountain. And we're just going, wow. And all these people are in this campground, and everybody's watching it going, wow, look at that. So pretty interesting stuff.
Yes, very interesting
anyway,
stuff.
I saw the battery draining and
You've seen it.
all that, and yeah.
Fascinating.
In fact, I not only saw it, I have it on video. And so I have a video on Encounters
Okay.
USA
So-
down at that lake. And
The researcher I mentioned, the American researcher Ken Shoulders, who passed on just a number of years ago, I believe 2013, worked with Hal Puthoff and worked at SRI, developed microelectronics that are in all our electronics. He's the guy that invented the ability to create the masking technique for He's the one that shifted to the study of these exotic vacuum objects. Do you know what he literally said? I just love what you just said, Matt. He said, they accelerate time. Mm-hmm. It's just what you said. The battery almost went through its whole life cycle in a couple seconds. That's one way. It's one way to look at it.
Yeah.
And how many of these time anomalies, by the way, that's another subject we haven't covered here. We'll save it for another episode. These time slips that people encounter where they encounter, you're familiar with this, Matt, where people encounter restaurants that have been closed for 20 years. They actually eat in. Yeah. Okay. So I know people this has happened to. I've talked to them extensively about it. It really happens. It happened right here in Boulder. A fellow who took my RV class said he was crossing over Arapahoe by Naropa College, and all of a sudden, everything went back to like 150 years ago as horse-drawn carriages, buildings low to the ground, old, what it would have looked like in the 1850s. The whole thing shifted, and then it went back. And that is, you really have to wonder what's going on there. And it's a time slip, and this is another aspect to it. I think, to sum this up, Matt, reality is not as solid as it looks. We can have that belief. We were taught this in school. We all were taught this. Everyone listening to this, you, me. But if all these types of entities and creatures exist, and they're able to disappear, maybe, you can call it a portal. That's one way, nothing wrong with calling it that. It's not as solid as it appears to be. And it just because it looks solid 99.99% of the time doesn't mean the other time that something happens isn't real. It could be that we're the weird ones living in a parallel reality of limitation, where it just seems really solid. You know what I'm sort of suggesting? That we think we know what reality is. Maybe we're in the parallel reality, and Dogman and Bigfoot can span through a whole bunch of them, and we're just in one sliver of that. They show up in our reality like 3D shapes show up in Flatland, that book by Edwin Abbott. Yeah, and they wonder, how's a three-dimensional shape? Where did it come from? Well, they're living on a table surface, and it turns out in that book at the end that the leaders of Flatland knew about Sphereland, but they didn't want to have they didn't want to tell anyone. Anyway, that book was written in the 1880s by Edwin Abbott in the UK. It's still so relevant to this discussion. So that's what I would like to suggest, is that maybe our view is the really limited view, that it's just solid and the only things that exist are the things you see. And we're surrounded by a sea of life forms that can choose to show up here and take off again. While they're here, they're really here in our version, at our frequency, our solid frequency, right? And then, anyway, that's one way. That's the way I look at it. That's the simian way of looking at it. But in any case, folks, this has been really fun. Any other question? Knock on wood. No pun intended. I'm reading the comments here, Matt. I know it's kind of late for you, so we'll wrap it up.
I will tell you that since I've been doing this podcast, I went into it kind of knowing some things, but I have learned so many things about like what reality is, and that I couldn't even begin to talk to you about it. But we have opened up so many ideas for future discussions, I guess.
Well, Matt, we're going to have to continue this at another time. And again, thanks for doing your show. You don't talk about, from what I've seen, am I wrong? You don't talk about politics on your show. Your show is about encounters.
No, it's all
encounters. That's why I don't know the other side of you. So the encounters are fascinating. I love your interviews. And in any case, folks, thanks for all of you being here. I really appreciate all of your comments, and this has been absolutely fascinating. And thank you, Matt.
Yeah.
I'm going to...
Thank you.
We will talk to all of you at another time. So take care for now, and we'll see you next
All
time.
right.
Bye-bye.